which is a global engineering, procurement, construction, and consulting company that focuses in infrastructure development. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Joanne, and she's going to introduce your panelists.
Thank you, and welcome back into the refrigerator in here. I hope everybody got nice and warm outside. Somebody commented earlier on my title, OneWater Practice Leader. I've had that title for 5.5 years, but I feel like I've had that involvement pretty much my whole career, having worked on water reuse projects, wetlands enhancement, all the little tiny pieces that go together. So hopefully our changes in title reflect the change in the way we all perceive OneWater planning. I'm going to go ahead and start and introduce, I'm going to go one by one, introduce our panelists as they get ready to speak, and at the end we'll take the questions. So our first speaker will be Britt. He's going to be talking about the City of Winter Haven OneWater projects and programs. Mike is a professional engineer and water resource planner with 40 years of experience managing water in Central Florida. He has an undergraduate degree in civil engineering from Georgia Southern University and a master's in urban and regional planning from Florida State University. Mike was the City of Winter Haven's Natural Resources Director for 25 years and Assistant Utilities Director for 7. His primary focus has been the establishment of sustainable water management practices that consider the full value and benefit that water provides.
Thank you. Everybody get warmed up out there, go outside. Hey, I thought I'd start out a little bit talking about projects. About talking about Winter Haven, it's a good perspective to see Winter Haven and how much we're surrounded by lakes. Did that just go out? Okay. So it's a good perspective to understand how the community fits in with the lakes and natural systems around it. We do have 4 existing nature parks, we call them, and we've constructed stormwater management nature parks, water quality type projects around the lakes around Winter Haven that also function as recreational entities. So if you get a chance to go by a nature park while you're here, we'd love to have you go take a look. But they're very popular parks built around the wetland treatment areas that we've already created. So we do have a history already with the multiple benefit project solutions that's very well accepted here in Winter Haven. I thought I'd also talk about the rain gardens. As you're driving around downtown here, if you look really closely at a lot of the intersections, there's rain gardens. So downtown Winter Haven is located in a sandy ridge soil area. So the solution there from a nature-based solution standpoint is percolation. So there's 60 rain gardens in and around the downtown area of Winter Haven that function as multiple benefit solution as well, because they look really nice too. So they're landscaped in a nice way, provide some open space. So that's a nature-based multiple benefit solution that Winter Haven has implemented. Also, I think OneWater programs, that Keely was talking about this quite a bit, but you can't talk about OneWater solutions without water conservation, I believe. I think that's one of the premier water resource type programs that OneWater needs to be looking at. Winter Haven's taking a very aggressive approach at this. We expect to save about 2 million gallons a day of water through water conservation long term. And when you think about the value of that from a water supply standpoint, you're talking about $120 million plus. 120 million is the low end of that estimate of what it costs to generate that water supply. So when you think about water conservation and the cost benefit, it is pretty incredible. So definitely take a bigger look at it. Now, talking about future projects, it's deserving of note that Winter Haven is in the water resource capital of Central Florida almost, it seems like to me, but we're also located at the very top part of the Peace River watershed, which is the middle graphic there. All the water from Winter Haven flows down Peach Creek, Peach River down to Charlotte Harbor. And on the far right, you see where we're located in the Peace Creek subwatershed of the Peach River. But we take up a good, third, almost half of Peach Creek watershed. So the main point there is anything that we do in the Winter Haven area benefits the entire Peace River water all the way to Charlotte Harbor. And also, people don't really realize this is not obvious, but we are also located at the top of the aquifer recharge area for the Florida aquifer too. So a lot of the recharge for the Florida aquifer that flows south and southwest happens in and around the Winter Haven, Lake Wales Ridge area. So whatever we do here in this area has incredible water resource benefits for a 9-county region that relies on this water for recharge, collecting water quality, all the above. So I'll kind of preview the projects based on that understanding. So here is a depiction of what we call the Sapphire Necklace. If you see downtown Winter Haven is located off to the left of that map, I'm not sure if that's clear or not, but the Peach Creek Drainage Canal basically surrounds Winter Haven as a community. And its primary function for 100 years plus has been to get rid of water. You know, they ditch and drain the land so they can make the land more usable for agriculture, things like that. Well, in today's world, getting rid of water is not a good idea. Well, the Sapphire Necklace is looking at restoring up to 5,000 acres of drained wetlands from that watershed and restoring those as water storage nature parks. So, okay, so if you think back to the concept that Winter Haven has stormwater management nature parks already, and those are generally 10, 20, 30 acres in size. Now we're talking about creating 5,000 acres of stormwater management nature parks to store, hold water, prevent flooding, improve water quality. And if you look real closely, there's a green line going through that is a trail that would provide multimodal transportation alternatives, recreation, things like that. Pete Seckler was talking about this as part of his land use strategy for Winter Haven. So now the picture becomes of all the benefits that could happen for a 9-county region, doing that work up here, as well as providing those amenities for recreation, scenic vistas, wildlife habitat, water quality, all those things that can happen in a wetland restoration concept. But also, Pete touched on this as well. What if those restored areas also were an attractive part of attracting growth and development? What if we could manage growth and development in a way that provides those amenities as an economic driver at the same time? Well, the cost benefit of doing projects and thinking this way is extraordinary. Would this be an expensive project? Yes. So Suzanne was talking about spending $100 million for a project that would provide wetland restoration, recharge, and water supply. This project is probably in the couple of $100 million range, but long term meaning, not 20 years, not 30 years, not 50 years. Think 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. The Sapphire Necklace was named after Boston's Emerald Necklace, if you're familiar with that at all. So this is in the mid-1800s. Somebody came with the idea and said, gosh, look at all these swamplands. Let's make them into something decent so we can build around it. Well, now that's one of the premier facilities for the whole city of Boston from a stormwater management standpoint. Well, think of what this area is going to be. This corridor between Tampa and Orlando and how it grows and develops. T. Michael mentioned first thing, Winter Haven, the Polk County region, is the #1 growth area of the entire country. Well, this is going to be one big megapolis at some point. Is it going to be 30 years, 40 years, 50? Not sure about that, but at that point, we have to be thinking about how do we protect water resources and encourage that growth and development at the same time. So OneWater kind of solves the growth issue versus water natural resource issue. I believe we have the ability to make that work together, which is extraordinary. Here's a little bit of a blow-up view. So this is kind of highlighting some of the current projects, the active projects we have going on from a feasibility standpoint. Just zoning in on the area where things that we're working on right now. This project, Mary Savanic kind of touched on this. This is what we call the Bradco Farmers Project. The city has already bought the land, 370 acres, I believe, or a little bit more, to implement this project. We're working on a way of P3 solutions and mechanisms to try to get this project developed and built. So that's ongoing right now. But the concept plan is on the right is the one we used as kind of more or less a way to talk about what the ideas were behind that project. I'm sure that's going to change in the future. But this project is located maybe 4 miles east of downtown Winter Haven. So definitely within the urban area. Talk about the land use perspective. Somebody could have used that drained wetland and probably filled it in and built a development at some point, which probably would happen. Well, now we get to develop a wetland restoration project to hold floodwaters in the Peace River watershed that can benefit, future generations forever. Gosh, what a bargain and a way to do that in a way that also creates the amenities from an urban recreational community asset standpoint. This is a project, we're doing a feasibility study through Kimberly Horn that's looking at, we call it the East Peach Creek area, further east of town. But there's an area that's already developing right now, and there's only a handful of landowners in that area. And we're talking about a way to manage water to restore that part of the Peach Creek system and allow for that urban development at the same time. So that feasibility study is ongoing right now, but we think we have an opportunity to restore the Peach Creek system, restore some of those wetlands, store more water, recharge more water at the same time that growth and development happens out there. So. Here's another very interesting project. I wish I could have overlaid this project with a Sapphire Necklace, and I'm not sure how obvious it is, but there's a line on the map going around Winter Haven. Well, this is a reuse water line that kind of more or less loops Winter Haven, but also kind of coincides with the Sapphire Necklace project. So it's like, okay, wow, we have an opportunity now to use the reuse water to rehydrate wetlands, to recharge water in the aquifer, to build things like aquifer storage and recovery systems, things like that along that area. Maybe to pull water out for irrigation if we have to, things like that. But so now we have not only the Sapphire Necklace Stormwater Flood Management Control Water Quality Project, we also have along that same area the ability to rehydrate wetlands, to use reuse water for different purposes along that route too. So the flexibility of that is just going to be phenomenal. Reuse water, one of the most reliable, flexible resources we have, such a valuable resource. And somebody mentioned, it wasn't that long ago, we were all concerned about how to get rid of reuse water, how do we get rid of it fast enough? But today, in the future, we're talking about not only putting it in a reuse system to implement wetland restoration, things like that, but also as a potable reuse system too, which I'll touch on in a minute. Oh, here it is right here. So that's completed a direct potable reuse study for us. I believe the study part is complete, so we're looking at, at least right now, the plan would be up to 5 million gallons a day. So that hadn't changed, okay. 5 million gallons a day of direct potable reuse in the future that will be implemented at a new water resource facility on the south side of town. We're going to be spending a couple $100 million revamping our wastewater treatment system to coincide that with a reuse system to possibly have the ability to treat water to potable standards from reuse, from stormwater, things like that. Another couple $100 million project down the road that we're going to be investing in from a water source standpoint. We're also looking at stormwater capture, not only in that facility I just mentioned, but also on the north side of town. We have a couple opportunities to capture stormwater, not just floodwater storage, but stormwater itself, and treat that water to either reuse standards or potable standards in the future up in that area. So stormwater is definitely on our horizon for looking at how we treat stormwater to also improve lake systems as well. I don't have a slide for this, but also Winter Haven is very active in the septic tank retrofit program too. We have a couple of areas we're looking at for that as well from a water quality standpoint, and to be able to capture that water for future use as well. So, and Pete kind of covered this territory along. Is Pete still here? Pete, you here? Oh, Pete already gone. Okay, good. So I can talk about him. That's okay. But as a future OneWater project, and this has been highlighted more times today than I thought it might be, but how we grow and develop really is going to matter. Protecting those opportunities to store and treat water on the land as it meant to be, in natural conditions, and how that growth and development interacts with the water resource areas of a region, either through recharge, through wetlands, through flood storage, those kind of things. Really important. And, if we can, the largest investment we're probably going to make in all of Florida is through growth and development, right? Just from a private sector standpoint, especially. If we can use that engine to help fuel water restoration type projects and improve quality of life for communities, it is a win-win-win in a very big way. And I think that is going to be one of the horizons I think we are going to be faced with in Florida as to how to go and develop in a way that's going to improve water resources, not just keep it the same. Keep it the same is not really the goal here. The goal here is to improve it and solve water for the long term, permanently. How do we solve water permanently and grow and develop at the same time? So I think Pete is on the right track there and how he's kind of managing that question. So I believe that's my last slide. So thank you.
Thank you. Earlier, Keely was talking about jumping out of Polk County and Winter Haven and going all the way to Seminole County. It's a couple of counties away. Now we're going to do an even bigger jump. We're jumping all the way to Hawaii, Honolulu, and we have Lenise Marrero who's going to be speaking on the current status of OneWater projects in Honolulu. It's showing that it's on. Okay, that's Lenise is the National OneWater Leader for Brown and Caldwell, so same title as I have, but with Brown and Caldwell. She has over 20 years of professional experience as an engineer and water resource planner, leading integrated and strategic plans, technical studies, and master plans. Policy development, community engagement, interagency coordination. In her former public sector role, she was the project and program manager for the award-winning OneWater LA program for the city of Los Angeles. This was a collaborative and stakeholder-driven long-term plan for managing LA's water resources through a holistic and multi-benefit lens. Throughout her career, she has focused on building partnerships to advance sustainable practices, environmental justice, and climate resilience, and her work has resulted in multi-beneficial projects, policies, and programs.
Thanks, Joanne. I'm happy to be here and happy to see open eyes across the room after that lunch. I think they're keeping the AC really cold on purpose. So I'm glad to have you all with me today. And again, this is the first project we're talking about that is outside of Florida, and it's way outside of Florida. We're going to take a trip over 4,000 miles due west, and we're going to land on the island of Oahu. But before I go into OneWater Honolulu, I do want to provide some context. Let's see if I do this right. Yes. I do want to provide some context on OneWater, the OneWater movement, the approach, and a few examples. So let's start with OneWater in general. We know that the OneWater movement has grown over the last decade. In fact, we have seen this not only through the development of OneWater plans, but we've seen it manifest through projects, policies, programs across the nation. And we see it manifest in the principles that they apply, including valuing our water, prioritizing partnerships and inclusion, and achieving multiple benefits. In fact, in 2022, the U.S. Water Alliance conducted a national survey to assess the state of the OneWater field. And what they found was that even though we do need more guidance and more standards in applying OneWater principles, there have been over 80 plans developed across the country. So either completed or in development. So that's good news. So the OneWater approach is embedded in the way that many of us do water. All of us in this room are thinking about OneWater. At Brown and Caldwell, we do a lot of OneWater projects, and we see it as a lens through which we view the connections between water, people, and the environment. And we leverage these connections to help us optimize the water cycle while considering equity, economics, resilience, and compliance. So I want to talk about a few examples of OneWater across the nation before I go into Honolulu. The first example is the Tucson OneWater 2100 plan. It is a plan that was recently approved. In fact, last year it was adopted by council. And what it does, it provides strategies for the city of Tucson's long-range water resource planning, capital and financial investments, and conservation practices, as well as policy directions. Secondly, the OneWater LA plan, which Joanne mentioned, was completed in 2018 in LA. It was a comprehensive long-term plan that engaged over 500 stakeholders and included project and policy recommendations to capture, conserve, and reuse water in LA. The third one I want to mention is the Vancouver Healthy Waters Plan, which is not titled OneWater, but it very much is OneWater centered. It does have an equity focus, as this plan is looking for healthy watersheds, but through reconciliation with tribal nations. And this is a plan that is currently in development as well. And I do want to mention OneWater Winter Haven. We've heard a lot about Winter Haven today, but what I want to point out about that plan, which we're also happy to participate in, is that it is serving as a model for other regions, other areas in this region. They're looking at water resources differently. They're incorporating OneWater principles into long-term water resources planning. And it's really an example to other utilities in this area. And the last one is OneWater Honolulu, which is more recent, very recent, and I'll be speaking about in more details today. So let's start with OneWater Honolulu and some background. What I'll be providing today is a summary because we are in the middle of developing this plan. It's in progress, and I'll start with the background. The City and County of Honolulu very much, and for a long time, have recognized that collaboration is key to climate adaptation. In 2020, they adopted an ordinance that defined a climate change adaptation OneWater policy, and in fact, they established an 8-agency OneWater panel. This OneWater panel is formed by different agencies and departments in the city, including the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, which is their water department and is a semi-autonomous department. They also have their stormwater and wastewater departments engaged. They have the Parks and Recreations Department, the Office of Resiliency, and a few other partners. So since the inception of this panel, they have been advancing integration of projects and policies. They have signed an MOU to formalize their collaboration in the way that they're working together. And in fact, because of that work since 2020, the city won the 2022 U.S. Water Prize for Outstanding Public Sector Organization. And this work constituted phase 1 of OneWater Honolulu. And then last year, the panel successfully secured ARPA funding to the tune of over $4 million to develop the OneWater Honolulu plan. This is phase 2 of their OneWater efforts. And we just kicked off the development of the plan in early 2024, and it's anticipated to be completed by late 2026. And here's their vision and mission, which we collaboratively developed with the panel and stakeholders. So what are the components of the plan? And these are at a very high level because are common components of the OneWater strategy. And I do want this to resonate with everyone who's reading it, so I'm keeping it at a high level. So the first component is to develop a collaboration framework, and we're actually actively working to develop this framework, and I'll go into more details in the next few slides. Data gathering or review, which seems like a pretty common task. The unique part of this task for the city of Honolulu is that the city is placing heavy emphasis on reviewing and compiling key information from past efforts. So we've had in Oahu in general, there are so many efforts that have happened recently, including the Resilient Oahu strategy and other plans, that we don't want to cause stakeholder fatigue. And we want to be very strategic about the way that we go out to the stakeholders and the input that we obtain. So we're taking a lot of time in reviewing those strategies and in pulling key themes for stakeholder engagement, key themes of concerns that the stakeholders have brought up in the past. And with this, we're going to be incorporating that into our work instead of asking the same questions again. But we will also make sure that we incorporate those groups that haven't been involved in the past. So it's also helping us evaluate gaps. The third component here is climate vulnerabilities mapping, which I'll cover shortly, very briefly. The fourth one is the development of the OneWater plan, which includes all of the components here, but it also, in addition, will include policy recommendations and private development guidelines. And these guidelines are very heavily focused on climate resilience. The fifth one is OneWater project development, which will include an adaptation strategy and an implementation plan. And this will be informed by the vulnerabilities analysis, it will be informed by stakeholder and OneWater panel input, as well as themes pulled from relevant past efforts. And last but not least, a funding strategy that will be developed in parallel with the project development. So let's go into climate vulnerabilities mapping. As we kicked off the project, it was very important to the city and county and to the team to gain awareness of the OneWater panel's concerns regarding climate hazards and potential opportunities for partnerships. So we've done multiple activities as a group to look at maps of Oahu to identify areas of concern, to air out any future long-term concerns we may have, and also to point out what partnerships are happening, what partnerships could be happening, and what collaboration could be improved. So this activity was very helpful in informing the vulnerabilities mapping effort, but it also helps us identify future opportunities. So continuing with the vulnerabilities mapping, it's currently in progress, as I mentioned, and it includes, yes, gathering information, but very critically, gathering information on water assets in critical infrastructure, as well as climate hazard maps that already exist, pulling all of this into a web map that the city and the panel are going to be able to utilize. It includes all types of water infrastructure. It includes social, cultural, and ecological resources, and climate hazards. This web map will be not just utilized by the team to identify vulnerable infrastructure, it will also be analyzed for project development and for prioritization of projects, working together with the OneWater panel. This mapping, as it is in progress, I don't have the final findings of the vulnerability analysis, but what I can tell you is that looking at the hazards, and these hazards, as you look at them, you can see that there are many commonalities with the hazards that we face in many locations. And in looking at these hazards, what we found as early observations is not surprising. It's not a shocking revelation, but it's good to point out that as we move more inland, the single hazards are more common. Obviously, they're more just single problems that are happening in specific areas. Multiple hazards in coastal areas, as you can see here, all of the colors, what really demonstrate are the hazards overlapping, the different types of hazards. And then multiple hazards in developed areas with infrastructure and other assets. So that is to be expected. And those are the types of areas where we're going to be recommending projects to address those vulnerabilities. So we are also working, as I mentioned, on developing a collaboration framework. This is a term that is not widely used. The city was very, very adamant about developing a collaboration framework, and we are defining it as we work on it. We are really working with the city to define and customize it for them. But what is it that they want to achieve? They want to set up a structure and a process so that they can have a clear idea or a clear and effective process of who is working together and how to build resilience. And they want to sustain institutional collaboration beyond plan development and project implementation. Now this is very important because they've seen that in many OneWater efforts, there could be an integrated resources plan that just lives in a shelf and is not implemented, or there could be projects that come out of that and are implemented, but the collaboration stops at the project implementation. So they wanted to make sure that they continue that collaboration through O&M and beyond, and that they continue that collaboration through policy enforcement and beyond. That was really important to them. This collaboration framework is phased into 2 phases. Just summarizing the first phase we are developing right now, and it's for foundational collaboration. What we're doing is looking at institutional barriers, and we're making recommendations to address these. And the second portion is project specific. So setting up a process for sustained collaboration through project stages, including beyond project implementation. So we have so far developed objectives jointly with the panel. We've compiled a lot of information on past efforts. We've identified engagement gaps, and we've also identified institutional barriers, which I'll get to in the next few slides. All of this information is feeding into not just the collaboration framework, but the other components. So the project development, the policy recommendations, and the funding strategy. So all of that was mostly related to the work of the panel. When we talk about external stakeholder engagement, like we said, we're trying to identify themes. And these are all the themes that have been identified through past efforts, and we're going to be incorporating those or considering those in the development of OneWater Honolulu. These themes help the city understand how to integrate community needs and values into the plan. Some examples are community engagement and empowerment, for example. The community is interested in partnerships, pursuing partnerships with community organizations. Under protecting the environment, the community is interested in nature-based solutions, very much interested. And restoring watershed health. So those are a few examples. So with that, we're kind of setting the foundation of, okay, this is what we know with external stakeholders, what is it that we still need to find out, and that's how we're continuing with stakeholder engagement. On the institutional side, meaning the city departments and the agencies that are working with them, what we're doing, and I mentioned we identified institutional barriers, but all with the goal of addressing those and making recommendations. So some of the categories where those barriers have been identified, and this may resonate with everyone in the room, CIP processes. We know that each agency has their own method of prioritizing CIP processes, which is CIP projects, which is totally fine because every agency has their own mission and mission to fulfill. They have their own functions. But the issue is when there's no line of sight between departments that are under a same city or same agency, and there's no consistency in identifying climate resilience related projects. So that's what we've identified. Yes, prioritization can continue to be individual between departments, but there needs to be better line of sight and coordination between those groups. Under funding and resources, we've identified that co-funding is a challenge currently. There are no standardized processes to share funds among departments and partners. There's a lack of available resources, which is the case across the board. And there are difference in budgeting processes, which don't quite align with the OneWater vision. In equity and engagement, the city has done very well in adopting an equity screen that is actually being implemented in a lot of the projects that they're doing. However, it needs to become a requirement and there needs to be improved coordination. And lastly, the category of development community. There are issues with the way that they interact with private development. So there needs to be some streamlining of processes. For example, they have individual departments that are dealing with some aspects of private development, and then they have committees that are dealing with other aspects. So we're looking to streamline those processes. So what's next for OneWater Honolulu? We will continue to develop the foundational piece of the collaboration framework, which addresses the institutional barriers. Part 2 of the collaboration framework, which is more project specific, will be developed as we develop the OneWater projects. Then we will have the OneWater project development informed by the vulnerabilities mapping that I just covered, stakeholder input themes that I just covered briefly, OneWater panel input, and identified institutional barriers. And lastly, the funding strategy, which we'll be developing in parallel. We found, very importantly, lessons learned from past OneWater plans, that a funding strategy needs to be developed early as you start looking at projects. So we'll be developing that in parallel with the project development, and all of this will be compiled into the OneWater plan. So that's it for the overview of Honolulu, and I'll be happy to take questions later on.
As luck would have it, I just accidentally closed out the bio of our next speaker, so I'll try to multitask and open that up. We've heard about OneWater from both sides, literally, of the United States, all the way from Florida to Honolulu. Now we're going to take a little step, I wouldn't say it's step back, but we're going to go more focused and look at individual components of OneWater instead of the overall programs. We're going to look at project called the 4G Wetlands, and also as the C51 Reservoir. And let me see if I can open up this bio here. If you look at your program, our next speaker was intended to be Ernie Cox. Ernie Cox had a last minute, something came up where he couldn't make it, and probably with less than 24 hours notice, his coworker Patrick Eiler, he even gave me the pronunciation, I still messed it up. Patrick Eiler agreed to step in and give this presentation. So a big hand to Patrick for stepping in. Patrick is the Vice President of Strategy and Policy at Family Lands Remembered, where he oversees and manages projects across the firm's 3 focus areas of land conservation, innovative water resources, and sustainable development. He plays a key role in expanding FLR's impact across its project portfolio, including enrolling critical habitats for endangered Florida panthers and the state land conservation programs, helping to secure public grants, assisting in the development of innovative water resource projects, facilitating large land transactions, such as the Green Heart of the Everglades acquisition in Southwest Florida. He also oversees collaborations with federal agencies, congressional offices, stakeholders, and partners on initiatives like the Big Cypress Oil Prevention Project. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from FSU and a Master's of Public Administration from Columbia University's Earth Institute, where he specialized in environmental policy and corporate sustainability. So Patrick.
How's everyone feeling? All right, we're gonna work on that. Okay, so yeah, my name is Patrick Eiler, standing in for Ernie today, and I'll be presenting the Pasco County Master Reuse Project, aka the 4G Wetland Project. So this project exemplifies OneWater ethos, in my opinion, and maybe yours after this presentation. It's a multi-use project intended to solve a water issue using nature-based infrastructure. It uses treated wastewater effluent to recharge a local aquifer. It recharges or rehydrates historic wetlands in the immediate area. And unbeknownst to us originally, it had the added benefit of creating exceptional wetland habitat for waterfowl and wading birds. One of those happy accidents, as Bob Ross used to say. So the project started in 2010 when Pasco County, faced with depleting aquifers in the area, commissioned a study to determine the feasibility of using, well, I don't know if exactly they were considering constructed wetlands at the time, but they were looking at recharge in the area, how to recharge the depleted aquifer, and they settled on the area of Pasco County near Lando Lakes, and specifically, and I wonder if this has a pointer. Yeah, look at that. The 4G Ranch right here in the circle. And so the study showed that the area around the ranch and within it was optimal location for water to infiltrate back into the aquifer based on soils, elevation, and other factors. Also, Raphael is in the crowd. He was the lead engineer on it, so if you have any very technical questions, he has all the time in the world. Because of this and many other factors, the 4G Ranch Beneficial Reuse Project was created. So the project location was in that infiltration area. It also happened to be between two Tampa water well fields, the Crossbar well field to the south or northwest, and the Cypress Creek well field to the southeast. So the ranch is a 3,000 acre family cattle ranch near Lando Lakes, owned by the Phillips family, who owns Phillips and Jordan, a heavy civil contractor company, and a client of Family Lands Remembered. As you saw, it's located between two Tampa well fields, which made it a prime location for the recharge project. So due to the proximity of the well fields, the ranch had become drier over the years than it had historically been. So the county approached the Phillips family with the project, and family accepted with the caveat that one, the county would hold a long-term lease on the project, that they would not actually own the land, and that the wetland would look natural. No straight lines like you might see with STAs in South Florida. They wanted it to contour to the lands. And so after design, the project took shape, the shape of 176 total acres of constructed wetlands, 15 wetland cells, and the project can take on up to 5 million gallons a day of reuse water. Due to the directive to make it look natural, the project also inadvertently created some great wetland habitat for local wildlife like migrating birds and lots of ducks. I mean, so many, especially in the wintertime. And so this, as I was mentioning, it was pretty dry prior to the project. This is a aerial taken, I think right before the project started. You can see, so the overlay is the black lines are the cells, the wetland cells, and you can see it's just all bone dry. This is actually up near the house, I think it's right here. Used to be a lake, but it was completely dry for most of the year. And so then we go to the historic photo from 1970, and you can see all of the areas outside of the wetland cells were wet at that time. The wetland project was specifically built in upland areas in order to effectively recharge all the water once it came through. So this is cell 7 before construction. Notice how dry it is just in the general area. There's a couple little ponds here and there, not too much though. This is during construction. This is right after construction and hydration and planting. You'll notice in the background, it already is starting to accumulate water in those historically wet areas. And then this is months after final construction, fully grown in and operating pretty well. So this is cell 8, right next door. It was a former, I think that was a feedlot for turkeys or something like that. That was included in the project. during construction, right after for planting, and then fully grown in. So I love this photo because it really shows the scale of it, but also the, how would I put this, the wetness of the project. So as you noticed, the wetland cells were put in the uplands, but a lot of the historic wetlands came in as well, and really created a nice mosaic throughout the ranch that really, kind of creates a healthy habitat for that area. Oh, and also I wanted you to contrast this to the first aerial that I showed, how dry it was prior. And so, I mentioned at the top of this presentation that it kind of takes on a OneWater ethos because it really encompasses of all the potential uses for the project. The water management entity, I'm blanking on the name, I'm sorry. District, thank you. Got aquifer recharge. The Pasco County found a end use for its reuse during wet weather discharges, and the added benefit of the Phillips family getting recreational opportunities on their lands due to the increased waterfowl habitat. And so, we kind of have seen this as a model to replicate in the future. I'm happy to talk about it during the panel, but we're also working on a similar project in Edgewater, Florida, where we're also incorporating, it's very similar to this, where we're taking effluent from the water treatment facility, but also then incorporating public access as well, and having trails that run through it with kiosks as we're anticipating waterfowl and birds and things like that. So that's it. I'll keep it short and happy to take any questions after. Thank you so much.
So our final panel speaker will be talking about another similar project, a piece of a big OneWater plan. It's Jeff Berriswell. He is the Southeast Dams practice leader for Black and Beach and works in Tampa. Throughout his 38-year career, he's managed the design and construction of many on-stream and off-channel reservoirs, including approximately 140 miles of earth embankments, 50 miles of cutoff wall systems. You can tell an engineer, instead of the planning side, and 60 miles of soil cement and roller compacted concrete upstream revetments. He has also been involved in dam safety inspections, emergency action plan development, and dam rehabilitation projects. So Jeff, you can take it away on C51.
Thank you so much. First of all, does anybody have a spare jacket around here? My fingers are a little numb. I hope I don't drop this thing. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the C51 reservoir. This is going to be a little bit different, but I think for the last talk of the session, I've got some construction photos, which I always find exciting, so we'll kind of hit those toward the end. But really interesting project. It's what I would call an informal public-private partnership, and you kind of see how it unfolds how it's unfolded as we go along. But really interesting project from the aspect of how it came into being. And then also a very interesting project is being an innovative reuse of mined land, which is really pretty neat too. So next slide. So, and one reason why it's such an important site is because it's located between Lake Okeechobee and West Palm Beach. It's adjacent, just north of State Road 80. And if you take a look at the blow up, it is immediately adjacent to the L8 canal, which comes down from Lake Okeechobee to the south. And then it comes into a confluence where there's a control structure which can route water due south through the water conservation areas, through the surface water treatment areas, and ultimately make its way down to the Everglades. And then it's also got a canal that heads due east, which takes it toward all of the heavy development on the East Coast. So it's got lots of options of where you can take the water once you've got it. And so there was an original reservoir, the L8 FEB is immediately adjacent to it on the east. And what the C51 reservoir is, the L8FEB is mainly environmental, so it's mainly there for taking peak high flows and then releasing during dry season, routing the water down toward the Everglades to help with the environmentally mostly. And then the C51 is a little bit different because its main focus is water supply, providing an alternate water use. And so let's go to the next slide. So it began in 2006. I've been involved in it for over a decade, but it predates me. And I will give a call out to Ernie Cox and Florida Lands Remembered, because they work very closely with the landowner, which is Palm Beach Aggregates, to put this project together, the concept of it, and then to flesh it out and to get it to the point where it gets constructed. So feasibility started in 2006, followed by some technical analyses and some preliminary discussions with regulators. There was a memo of understanding to consider to keep moving forward with the project into the feasibility stage. In 2010, 2011 to 2013, that's when I started getting involved. So we started doing the preliminary design and the preliminary costing so they could see how economical it is. And by the way, it's a very economical way to get additional water supply over other conventional methods. And so then 2014 to 2015, moved into permitting through the DEP and also worked on finalizing the design had it divided into two cells, the first phase, which is what I'll be talking about, and the second phase also for a combined 14,000 acre feet with a 35 MGD capacities of a sustainable water supply for the first phase. And the second phase will be a bit bigger with 46,000 acre feet of storage area. So moving to 2016, 2017, we got some funding pulled together with the DEP, and it was move forward through the South Florida Water Management District, and then you get into 2018 to 2020, and that was the time when they were putting together the actual commitments from the different water utilities for the amount of water that they would use. And basically there was 8 utilities using anywhere from 1 MGD to purchasing 15 MGD capacity on an annual basis. And so that all got done just in time for COVID. So we did the work really through the peak of COVID, which had some interesting challenges. And it was completed last year, about early last year. Next slide. This just shows you the different municipalities, the utilities that were involved. Big players, obviously, were Broward County, Miami-Dade, City of Fort Lauderdale, but several others as well. Next slide. And then it was a close cooperation also with the regulatory agencies. So you've got the DEP, you've got South Florida Water Management District, you've got the Lake Worth Drainage District, and you've got Palm Beach County all involved in moving the project forward. Palm Beach Aggregates is the owner. I don't know if I mentioned it's still an active mine. So these are some mined out cells that they're using. Phillips and Jordan was the contractor that built it, and then Black and Beach was the lead engineer on it. Also, North Star worked on the control structure and such. And then Goldman Sachs helped provide financing for the project. Next slide. So I'll just talk really quickly about the project objectives, the basic components, and some of the unique construction features. And then I'll go pretty quickly through some construction photos and talk about the future opportunities at the site. Next slide. So it's primarily a public water supply, and also to help take the strain off of well fields down in South Florida. Also, it can provide some of that environmental benefit of taking flows during high flow, releasing flows during low flow. And the water that gets released, they track the amount of water that's being released from the system, and then it's accredited 1 for 1 for every million gallons that they put in upstream at this facility. the municipalities get to use that one MGD and withdrawal from the canal system farther down. And it also is a very reliable water supply. Next slide. Just some of the project components. You'll see there on the east, you've got the L8 FEV, and then as you go to the west, it's 3 cells, highlighted in blue, that's the 3 cells that are already lined out that comprise the C51 reservoir. It's a unique limestone formation to where it's watertight, relatively watertight, to where they can, we're actually going down to, we'll pull the water down to elevation -20, which in South Florida in limestone is pretty unheard of. And then the maximum pool will be at about ground level, which is at elevation 16. And so it's basically a below grade storage area, but it's still a significant water volume that it captures. And we'll see on the next slide here. Basically, you've got the L8 FEV, which is located to the east, and we just created a channel through the existing reservoir embankment down to elevation -20, and then it's got an intake structure there, and then it goes into a control structure, and then we pipe it through a tunnel, through pipes that we tunneled in underneath some power lines and such to get over to the C51 reservoir on the west side. And as it's being used operationally and generally, they'll just work in tandem. The gates will pretty much be open on the control structure, and as the L8 moves up and down, C51 will move up and down. And what that did is it created a considerable cost savings, because the pump station and the controls and the intake structure for L8 could also be used jointly for C51, and you didn't have to create new structures for that. Next slide. And this just gives you a cross-section at the end of the inflow channel from L8. You can see where it goes through a control structure, just simple gated control structure through twin 96-inch pipes that were micro-tunneled for about 1,000 feet over into the C51 reservoir. Next slide. I won't bore you too much, but one thing that's kind of interesting is on the south and east side of the reservoir, you have a full roller compacted concrete section, and it's tied into a cutoff wall, which cuts through, creates a relatively impermeable barrier through the limestone. And then most of the section, great dam section that goes down to competent limestone, most of the dam section is actually below grade. You won't even see it unless you're looking at the interior of the reservoir. Next slide. And then we have the more conventional earthen embankment, which is what you usually see in dams in Florida. And on the upstream side, the blue there, that's some roller compacted concrete for wave action protection. And you also have a cutoff wall that goes through the middle. Next slide. So some of the things that were very unique was, first of all, the geology, that it's watertight, and with relatively little pumping, you can keep it dry. We had to pre-blast and trench portions of the cutoff wall that we put through the limestone. And so this is the first full RCC dam and embankment section in the state of Florida, and it's about 6,000 feet long. And also the connection through the existing L8 embankment was quite a bit of a challenge. Next slide. So now just go through some construction photos quickly. Next slide. This shows you when they got out to the site, started pumping it down. It really only took a few pumps to get it pulled down and then to maintain it. And you can see on the far side there, the far right, that is during active construction. They put in a rim ditch around the side. They just had to put in some relatively small pumps, keep that rim ditch pulled down, and they could construct the reservoir. Next slide. And this shows you the blasting. Most of the alignment that had the cutoff wall in it, we pre-blasted, and so it's always kind of fun to see the blasts. But when we were close to the transmission line and a natural gas line, we had to use a different technique. Next slide. And that's where we had to use, essentially, it's like a giant chainsaw. It goes down about 30 feet, and it's got some serious horsepower. And so it just saw cut the limestone down to about 20 feet below the top of the limestone. Next slide. And this shows putting in the low permeability. It's a blend of soil taken from the site, blended with a clay and put back in the hole to create an impermeable cutoff wall. Next slide. And this shows you where we're getting the base of the roller compacted concrete dam smoothed out, cleaned up with demo concrete. Next slide. And this just shows you the vinyl tie-in of the cutoff wall with the future embankment. Next slide. We had to use a blend of, one of the advantages and one reason why we use roller compacted concrete is because we're building at an aggregates mine, which has the aggregates to use in the concrete, so it makes it very economical to use the mine's product to build the dam. And we had to do a blend of different gradations of the aggregate added with that cement added. Okay, next slide. And just kind of showing how the roller compacted concrete, what I think is pretty unique about it is it's actually placed like earth fill. So you spread it with dozers, you compact it. Next slide. And at the end of the day, you create this just a layer of concrete that's been placed with construction equipment. It makes it much more economical. Next slide. And so this is what it looks like at the end in the interior. You've got about 22 feet of vertical wall in the interior, and then if you look on the exterior, next slide, you'll see these progressive steps that go up on the outside of it. Next slide. Just really quickly, this is where they're putting in what we call the flat plate roller compacted concrete on the embankment, where we have an earthen embankment, so the white is the concrete. It's got an under drain system, geotextiles and such, and it's keyed in at the toe by digging into the limestone. Next slide. And it was mostly done, it was predominantly done at night because the concrete generates so much heat, and in Florida we have too much heat during the day that we had to do it at night when temperatures are cooler, and it allowed the concrete to cure better. And next slide. This is just a finished crest. Downstream got topsoil and grass. Next slide. And this just shows you the control structure, some of the steel, and putting in the twin ports for the tunnel. Next slide. This shows you where the head wall of where the water's coming into the control structure from LAFEB. Next slide shows you that head wall being constructed. Next slide. Then this is kind of interesting. This is the micro tunneling that was done. Again, we had to tunnel 1,000 feet to twin pipes to get it to make the connection. And it was pretty challenging because it was actually they call it a mixed face tunnel where the bottom half was in limestone and the top half was in sand. Very difficult to control it, but they did a great job. Next slide. And this just shows the tunnel boring machine coming out the hole at the end, and it's really exciting to see it come out the proper hole in the proper place. We all breathe a little easier when that happens. Next slide. This is just the discharge structure on the other side into the interior of the reservoir. One thing that's interesting about that is we had to use a jacking tunnel. We had to build a sheet pile, a box sheet pile structure to be able to get reaction to do the tunnel boring machine. And we actually reused about 2/3 of that structure and incorporated it into the permanent discharge structure. So another way that we were saving money on the project. Next slide. And this is the end. This is kind of the southern portion of it. One thing that's kind of interesting, you see the embankment section coming in and tying into the all concrete section as it goes around. And in the distance, in the far distance, there is the existing FEB, LAFEB. And this shows you that channel that we were talking about from the LAFEB to the control structure. And the control structure, which looked pretty big in the other pictures, about 40 feet high, it's just those two little, beside the two white buildings, there's a little gray area there. That's all you can see in the control structure. So. Next slide. So what's coming up, and actually is currently in the works, the red area there is the first section of the phase 2, which is the 46,000 capacity. So we've got 2 more cells that are mined out, and they're building, currently building that into a reservoir. One thing that's interesting about that is it'll be more of the environmental is why it's being built, repurposed, and it's going to have a new intake structure, which kind of that red line goes due north. That is a new intake structure, and discharge structure, so it will act fully independent. That phase and the future phase will be fully independent of the L8FEB and the current phase 1 C51. So it's going to end up with over 105,000 acre-feet of storage, which is pretty significant. And it's going to have all kinds of flexibility in where the water goes and what it's used for. And at the end of the day, this gives a really good reliable water supply for this southern portion of the state. That's all I got.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like the audience to also think. There's some questions you have of the speakers individually or as a group. I'll ask for you to raise your hand here in a second. But as a first question, this is probably more for Lenise and for Mike, but we've heard this discussed earlier, but one of the barriers to OneWater is often these internal barriers with how our utilities and cities and governments are built. It's you have your stormwater managed separately from your water and wastewater and from transportation. And so just wanted some discussion from Mike first on how you overcame those barriers, and Lenise also how you've seen it with LA and other projects overcoming those barriers. You want to go first, Mike? We have mics on the table, but they've been a little crazies. Mine's in here. Why don't we just do this? Why don't we just pass around?
I would say from the city of Winter Haven, it was kind of a little bit easy trying to break that barrier initially. There was already an appreciation for the city of Winter Haven's connection to the lakes and water in general, and that they understood that their water supply from the aquifer was connected to the lakes. Well, so for Winter Haven, once our city leaders and city commission heard that we were going to work on solving that problem long term, more to protect the lakes and in a water use caution area where the lakes were somewhat vulnerable, they were all for it. And plus we had, y'all have probably already met T. Michael this morning. T. Michael at the time was my director, a very visionary, very forward-thinking guy. Our city manager at the time was very visionary, forward-thinking. So they kind of got it right away, and they actually encouraged me quite a bit. We also made, I think, almost 100 presentations around the community about the idea, that kind of thing. So that was successful. We also made a very direct connection between OneWater and how we're going to manage that, and the economic growth and the quality of life that the community was focused on. When I talk about OneWater in Winter Haven, I talk about, we had a visioning effort in the year 2000 that talked about quality of life and how the lakes were connected. I talk about that as being the first step towards our OneWater journey, and that was through the Chamber of Commerce looking at economic development. So it kind of was all laid out. I was just the guy that kind of happened to be there at the right time to help it along. So.
I guess I'll speak in general terms from what I've seen in different OneWater efforts. We can't overstate the importance of jointly developing a OneWater mission with your partners. It takes time. It takes sitting in a room with a bunch of agencies and partners and whatever stakeholders need to be involved, and working on a vision that everyone can rally around, and collectively agreeing on how you're gonna achieve that vision. But there's also a wide range of partnerships that you can endeavor in as you move on to develop, to implement that vision. It could be from JPAs, partnerships between different departments, MOUs, like we mentioned, heard about a lot today. So there needs to be some kind of formalized agreements between partners. And that also takes time to come up with. So I think that we need to allow ourselves enough time to have those conversations and not rush it, so that we can end up with something that everyone can agree on and move forward in implementing.
Thank you. It's a little bit along the same lines, but one thing, like looking at the C51 reservoir, you had so many partners, and the same thing with the 4G wetlands. And so just what are some of the challenges there? How did you figure out who's going to pay for this? Who's going to operate it? What's the funding mechanism? I'll let Jeff start with that, and maybe you can answer that.
Sure. Yeah, and that was quite a process. That took quite a while. It was probably a good 5 years or so really in the making to get that all pulled together. So the basic concept is Palm Beach Aggregates would build the reservoir, build the control structure and such, and then they would hand it over to the South Florida Water Management District to operate it. And so the way it's funded is all of the engineering design, all of the construction was all done by Phillips and Jordan. And then when they turn the keys over to the South Florida Water Management District, that's the point when the other municipalities pay for the capital costs, and it's proportionate to how many MGD they're going to use. So they take the capital cost, divide it by the 35, which is the total use, and then each one, if you just divvy it out by whatever demand each utility is committed to. And then the other thing is, as it goes into operation, they will be doing an audit of actual maintenance costs, and then projecting forward the maintenance costs for the next year, the next several years, and come upon an acceptable cost that then each municipality again will proportionately pay for the operation and maintenance of the facility. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the 4G project, it was slightly different because it was on private land, and the landowners were very interested in pursuing it. And so I wasn't, it was early on when I joined the firm, but as I recall, it moved very quickly. I'm pretty sure they went from design to complete operation within 3 years. And I don't think they really encountered too many obstacles, but I think that was partially because everyone was just so excited to get it moving. The landowners were very interested, the contractor as well, and both the city and the county and the district needed the operational flexibility. So, This is Raphael.
Thanks, Patrick. And see, you didn't come until like a lot of the work had already been done. So it did take extraordinary time. Actually, it took 10 years. And if you notice, the feasibility work that you presented was 10 years before operation. And but there was a lot of agreement on what the problem was and what the solution had to be. But it took a couple of years of groundwater modeling to come up with what the district calls the quantifiable benefit, right? That's what goes against the contract for funding. And that took a long time, and a lot of really smart people looking at a lot of data to come up with that. So I think the collaboration piece is huge, but once you get some of those hard questions answered, some of that hard work done, then things tend to go smooth. So,
Thanks, Raphael. Mike, do you want to add to that? I know you have the backup farms.
The biggest challenge there is certainly the land component and working with landowners, and we tried early on to develop some conservation easements of sorts to store water, and we thought that would go over pretty well, but it didn't. And then for government to come in to kind of buy the land was not a popular idea, so it's a very big barrier even now, for sure. So these guys' efforts to work with landowners to make that happen, you would hope it would be more common and easier to do, but we're not finding that was easy to do at all.
Lenise, do you want to add anything?
I'll speak directly to the types of projects that I've seen a lot in the West, which are recycled water projects, and a lot of the challenges there have to do with the fact that there's a wastewater and a stormwater agency that are working together, but there's also large landowners that they may have to work with. Again, it takes time. It takes sometimes decades to get to progress in a project. But it's also the fact that there's a lot of differences in the ways that the departments and agencies work, and the bureaucracy gets in the middle of it, right? So I think the way that those challenges have been overcome has been really by formalizing a lot of the partnerships through agreements, like I mentioned before, but also getting public advocacy for the project. That has been very important. In terms of recycled water type projects and other projects, public advocacy has been important, and that also takes time. Early and ongoing engagement internally with agencies, but also external engagement of the public, so that eventually you have enough supporters for that project and it can move smoothly through permitting, regulations, and all of that, the approvals.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Lynn, here. Right, yeah.
So for Lenise, I'm just wondering, how to use the U.S. Water Alliance blueprint document for their OneWater effort, and then I also want to do the contractors work for the project, the Reservoir project.
Did you hear that?
I didn't hear that last time.
I didn't hear the last
The
one.
part who the contractors are for those two projects, the OG project.
Okay. Yeah, the first question is about, I guess, linking it to the U.S. Water Alliance blueprint for OneWater was her question to you, and then the other one, who funded?
They are very much using the U.S. Water Alliance documents as guidance. The blueprint for OneWater, actually the one that they're using most for guidance is the WRF study, which is the blueprint for OneWater that was developed a few years ago. And they're also using some recent guidance on the assessing your OneWater readiness, and that project was also from WRF that was completed recently. They've all been completed by different consulting companies in collaboration with the Alliance and with WRF. So a little bit of everything.
And I can just answer for both of those. There was only one contractor. It was Phillips and Jordan for both of them.
Are there more questions? I think I have somebody helping with the mic now.
I was just going to ask about I'm familiar with that really dry area between the two well fields, in Tampa. And I was wondering, a lot of times there's a trade-off in terms of aquifer recharge or wetland enhancement, and it's interesting that the setting was to put the water in the upland areas, but then also seem to improve the adjacent eco pockets with superficial aquifers. So I'm not sure, you were held down to the talk, but if you could speak to that at all about the benefits to the superficial aquifer, Florida aquifer, if there's been any quantification of that.
Raphael, I'm gonna need you to come up here and backstop me. But as far as I understand, he's the engineer.
Rafael Vasquez. It's an excellent question. So I mentioned the modeling earlier. So we got to calibrate those models for 3 years after operations with real operational data. And what we see is about 50% of the water applied goes to the Florida aquifer, and 50% of it stays in the superficial to rehydrate the lakes and wetlands. It's very close to what we thought we would get there from the previous modeling before operations. So in this case, you do get about 50-50. A lot of folks have asked me over the years, like, what is the efficiency for recharge for groundwater recharge wetlands? Well, that is such a site-specific question that it shouldn't even be asked. In this case, it's 50-50. In other cases, like in the Ocala wetlands, for example, it's 100% recharge. Like it all goes to the Florida aquifer. So it can be.
So it's fine, or you might not be, but with regard to those areas that were off limits, some of them perhaps historically wetlands.
No, we looked at the historical aerials and Patrick kind of showed those. And we were very conservative on the wetland delineations to make sure we were on upland. For one, because we didn't want to impact any natural wetlands. We were here to restore them. You know, last thing we wanted to do was impact them. But second is to provide that driving head too. So we're quite certain. I mean, we looked at aerials that go back to the beginning of the century to make sure that those actually were the earliest areas that we could get.
Thank you.
What volumes of water are we talking about? How many MGD?
It's permitted for 5 MGD, and they've been putting on the order of 3 to 3.5. We're competing with irrigation water now pretty hard to get water there. So that's, if I want to bring up another topic, is how do we compete with irrigation water when we have projects that are really good? But irrigation seems to take precedence over any other uses.
It is a big question, when do we value water too much to keep just throwing it away on the land to irrigate St. Augustine lawns, but there's much higher uses. I've got 2 questions. I'll start here.
Yeah, there's a follow-up on that last one. What is the source from the water? Is this reused water from the county, or is it multiple agencies? Where does the reclaimed water come from?
Pasco County. It's all after Pasco County utilities. They have a number of places.
Murphy?
For Lenise, on your one slide, you were talking about the community engagement and education, and it showed community partnerships and inspiring that awareness and education. I don't usually see community partnerships, public outreach and that type of thing. What kind of difference is that compared to what we would normally hear in this realm?
A lot of the community partnerships I've seen are mostly related to neighborhood scale green infrastructure. So when you see, for example, green alleys, green infrastructure at the neighborhood scale, the utility will commonly partner with a community organization or even with a neighborhood board to do the maintenance of those projects, but also to advocate for the project, to do tours of the projects. So those are kind of the types of partnerships that they're looking to enhance and to expand. Also on the recycled water side, I've seen partnerships where the utility relies on some community volunteers to do the tours of the newly constructed facility. They will have education components to it, but the community will be really the voice of the utility. So they'll do a speakers bureau, they'll train community members to really present the technical aspects of the project. They'll always have a technical expert there, but they'll have community voices expressing really what the benefits are in the community, and they'll do the tours of the projects as well.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna.
Other question for the C51. On the C51 Reservoir project, was there any consideration for energy storage and recovery? I understand from the slide it was mostly gravity flow, but was there consideration for using that potential energy for energy storage and recovery?
Yeah, well, so because it's a below grade reservoir, there's not really as much of an opportunity as if it was, storing an elevated, had a normal pool that's quite a bit above ground. You have more potential energy there. In this case, being a below grade storage, didn't have as much opportunity for that.
Any more questions from the audience? And everybody's wanting to go get warm, aren't they? I'm gonna make you stay cold one more second. I have one more question. I'm gonna give it to Mike first, but the others are welcome to join in. It came from Mike, but it is a really good question. So many times when we're planning for water supply planning, you'll look at the cost and you look at the other benefits, do cost-benefit analysis, but cost always ends up winning. It seems like you're not gonna build the most expensive project, even though the long-term benefits may be so great that it makes sense to do something a little more. So his question was, are we ready to plan and implement permanent solutions related to water as Florida grows and builds out, not just satisfying the immediate cheap solution, but look at those long-term benefits? I think I framed that correctly.
Well, I love answering my own question. That's kind of fun. And I touched on this a little bit. So just thinking about Winter Haven and the questions we ask about solving water quality problems or flooding problems or water supply problems or quality of life problems, traffic recreation, that kind of stuff. If we think about that, as engineers, I think historically we think of a 20, 30, 40-year time frame, maybe, but as a community, thinking in a visioning process, we're thinking hundreds of years, how are we going to stay sustainable over a 100-year time frame? And then the solutions become different. You're willing to invest money into a solution for a permanent solution to water versus just incrementally solving problems that might take big dollars initially. But so, just as an exercise in thinking, if you thought about all the problems that you have as a community, as a region, as a state, and if you were to put a price tag on solving those problems individually, it's just astounding. We all know there's not enough money to solve those problems. But if you think about solving those problems permanently long-term, and you think about solving multiple problems together, it becomes a little more palatable, a little more manageable. So that's what I hope OneWater is trying to do. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The other benefit to that we don't think of as water managers is the community side, the quality of life, recreation, all that kind of stuff. But it's such a big benefit. So you think about Florida in 200 years. So the city of Boston created the Emerald Necklace thinking 200 years ahead. Well, we can do that too. If we thought that way and spent the money now to solve those problems, we would save so much money and create so many additional benefits. It's not even thinkable as to how many benefits we can create from spending that money now versus spending more money longer term in the future. So not sure all that makes sense. A lot of jumbled ideas together, but that's the idea.
Anybody else want to add?
I'll just throw in there, much more broad and sweeping than Mike's vision. I can't compete with that. But at Family Lands, remember, we've been thinking a lot lately about the nexus between resilience and water supply, specifically for inland communities, because as we've seen of all this flooding with hurricanes and honestly just regular storm events now, I've seen a lot of flooding for inland communities, and trying to understand, looking for projects that have that multifaceted approach, where you can tackle the resilience issue and the flooding for local communities, but then also retain that water for water supply and maybe even water quality component too. Something to that nature where we're trying to replicate what wetlands did 100 years ago, as Mike said, and could do in the future. I don't know, try and tackle all those problems at once. So I hope that made sense.
I guess I'll add that a lot of us are dealing with the same challenge, and it's balancing quick action with the challenges that we're facing today and long-term planning with the right solutions for long-term. There is a way to achieve both, right? If we're thinking holistically now and we're doing those projects with as many benefits and as many partners as we can, now those projects can totally become a standard as long as we can back them with the right data and projections and the modeling and the right partnerships and the right information. They can totally become a standard and become part of that long-term solution.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll let y'all go and get your sunshine break and we'll come back.